Pirates, with a foreword and sundry decoration by C. Lovat Fraser.
Captain William Kidd. We are now going to give an account of one whose name is better known in England than most of those whose histories we have already related. The person we mean is Captain Kidd, whose public trial and execution here rendered him the subject of all conversation. In the beginning of King William's War, Captain Kidd commanded a privateer in the West Indies, and by several adventurous actions acquired the reputation of a brave man as well as an experienced seaman. About this time the pirates were very troublesome in those parts, wherefore Captain Kidd was recommended by the Lord Bellamont, then governor of Barbados, as well as by several other persons, to the government here, as a person very fit to be entrusted with the command of a government ship, and to be employed in cruising upon the pirates, as knowing those seas perfectly well, and being acquainted with their lurking places. But what reasons governed the politics of those times I cannot tell, but this proposal met with no encouragement here, though it is certain it would have been of great consequence to the subject, our merchants suffering incredible damage by those robbers. Upon this neglect, the Lord Bellamont and some others who knew what great captures had been made by the pirates and what a prodigious wealth must be in their possession were tempted to fit out a ship at their own private charge and to give the command of it to Captain Kidd, and to give the thing a greater reputation, as well as to keep their seamen under the better command, they procured the king's commission for the said Captain Kidd. Captain Kidd had also another commission, which was called a commission of reprisals, for it being then wartime, this commission was to justify him in the taking of French merchant ships, in case he should meet with any. He sailed out of Plymouth in May 1696 in the Adventure, galley of 30 guns and 80 men. The place he first designed for was New York. In his voyage thither he took a French banker, but this was no act of piracy, he having a commission for that purpose, as we have just observed. When he arrived at New York, he put up articles for engaging more hands, it being necessary to his ship's crew, since he proposed to deal with a desperate enemy. The terms he offered were that every man should have a share of what was taken, reserving for himself and owners 40 shares. Upon this encouragement, he soon increased his company to 155 men. With this company he first sailed for Madeiras, where he took in wine and some other necessaries. From thence he proceeded to Bonavist, one of the Cape Verde Islands, to furnish the ship with salt, and from thence went immediately to St. Jago, another of the Cape de Verde Islands, in order to stock himself with provisions. When all this was done, he bent his course to Madagascar, the known rendezvous of pirates. In this way he fell in with Captain Warren, commodore of 3 men of war. He acquainted them with his design, kept them company 2 or 3 days, and then leaving them, made the best way for Madagascar, where he arrived in February 1696, just 9 months from his departure from Plymouth. It does not appear all this while that he had the least design of turning pirate, for near Mahala and Joanna both he met with several Indian ships richly laden, to which he did not offer the least violence, though he was strong enough to have done what he pleased with them. And the first outrage or depredation I find he committed upon mankind was after his repairing his ship and leaving Joanna. He touched at a place called Maybe upon the Red Sea, where he took some Guinea corn from the natives by force. After this he sailed to Bab's Key, a place upon a little island at the entrance of the Red Sea. Here it was that he first began to open himself to his ship's company, and let them understand that he intended to change his measures, for happening to talk of the Maka fleet, which was to sail that way, he said, "We have been unsuccessful hitherto, but courage, my boys, will make our fortunes out of this fleet." And finding that none of them appeared averse to it, he ordered a boat out, well manned, to go upon the coast to make discoveries, commanding them to take a prisoner and bring to him, or get intelligence any way they could. The boat returned in a few days, bringing him word that they saw 14 or 15 ships ready to sail, some with English, some with Dutch, and some with Moorish colors. He therefore ordered a man continually to watch at the masthead, lest this fleet should go by them. And about 4 days after, toward evening, it appeared in sight, being convoyed by 1 English and 1 Dutch man of war. Kidd soon fell in with them, and getting into the midst of them, fired at the Moorish ship which was next to him. But the men of war, taking the alarm, bore down upon Kidd, and firing upon him, obliged him to sheer off, he not being strong enough to contend with them. Now he had begun hostilities, he resolved to go on, and therefore he went and cruised along the coast of Malabar. The first prize he met was a small vessel belonging to Aden. The vessel was Moorish, and the owners were Moorish merchants, but the master was an Englishman. His name was Parker. Kidd forced him and a Portuguese that was called Don Antonio, which were all the Europeans on board, to take on with them. The first he designed as a pilot and the last as an interpreter. He also used the men very cruelly, causing them to be hoisted up by the arms and drubbed with a naked cutlass to force them to discover where they had money on board and where it lay. But as they had neither gold nor silver on board, he got nothing by his cruelty. However, he took from them a bale of pepper and a bale of coffee, and so let them go. Soon after this he came up with a Moorish ship, the master whereof was a Dutchman called Schipper Mitchell, and chased her under French colours, which they observing, hoisted French colours too. When he came up with her, he hailed her in French, and they, having a Frenchman on board, answered him in the same language, upon which he ordered them to send their boat on board. They were obliged to do so, and having examined who they were and from whence they came, he asked the Frenchman, who was a passenger, if he had a French pass for himself. The Frenchman gave him to understand that he had. Then he told the Frenchman he must pass for captain, and by God, says he, you are the captain. The Frenchman durst not refuse, doing as he would have him. The meaning of this was that he would seize the ship as fair prize, and as if she belonged to French subjects, according to a commission he had for that purpose, though one would think, after what he had already done, that he need not have recourse to a quibble to give his actions a colour. In short, he took the cargo and sold it some time after, yet still he seemed to have some fears upon him lest these proceedings should have a bad end, for coming up with a Dutch ship sometime, when his men thought of nothing but attacking her, Kidd opposed it. Upon which a mutiny arose, and the majority being for taking the said ship and arming themselves to man the boat to go and seize her, he told them, such as did, never should come on board him again, which put an end to the design, so that he kept company with the said ship some time, without offering her any violence. However, this dispute was the occasion of an accident, upon which an indictment was afterwards grounded against Kidd. For Moore, the gunner, being one day upon deck, and talking with Kidd about the said Dutch ship, some words arose betwixt them, and Moore told Kidd that he had ruined them all, upon which Kidd called him dog, took up a bucket and struck him with it, which breaking his skull, he died the next day. But Kidd's penitential fit did not last long, for coasting along Malabar, he met with a great number of boats, all which he plundered. Upon the same coast he also lit upon a Portuguese ship, which he kept possession of a week, and then having taken out of her some chests of Indian goods, 30 jars of butter, and some wax, iron, and 100 bags of rice, he let her go. The Adventure galley was now so old and leaky that they were forced to keep 2 pumps continually going, wherefore Kidd shifted all the guns and tackle out of her into the Quedagh Merchant, intending her for his man of war. And as he had divided the money before, he now made a division of the remainder of the cargo, soon after which the greatest party of the company left him, some going on board Captain Culliford, and others absconding in the country, so that he had not above 40 men left. He put to sea and happened to touch at Amboyna, one of the Dutch Spice Islands, where he was told that the news of his actions had reached England, and that he was there declared a pirate. The truth on't is, his piracies so alarmed our merchants that some motions were made in Parliament to inquire into the commission that was given him, and the persons who fitted him out. These proceedings seemed to lean a little hard upon the Lord Bellamont, who thought himself so much touched thereby that he published a justification of himself in a pamphlet after Kidd's execution. In the meantime, it was thought advisable to publish a proclamation offering the king's free pardon to all such pirates as should voluntarily surrender themselves, whatever piracies they had been guilty of at any time before the last day of April 1699. That is to say, for all piracies committed eastward of the Cape of Good Hope to the longitude and meridian of Socotora and Cape Camorin, in which proclamation Avery and Kidd were accepted by name. When Kidd left Amboyna, he knew nothing of this proclamation, for certainly had he had notice of his being accepted in it, he would not have been so infatuated to run himself into the very jaws of danger, but relying upon his interest with the Lord Bellomont, and fancying that a French pass or two he found on board some of the ships he took would serve to countenance the matter, and that part of the booty he got would gain him new friends. I say all these things made him flatter himself that all would be hushed, and that justice would but wink at him. Wherefore he sailed directly for New York, where he was no sooner arrived, but by the Lord Bellomont's orders he was secured with all his papers and effects. Many of his fellow adventurers who had forsook him in Madagascar came over from thence passengers, some to New England and some to Jersey, where, hearing of the king's proclamation for pardoning of pirates, they surrendered themselves to the governor of those places. At first they were admitted to bail, but soon after were laid in strict confinement, where they were kept for some time till an opportunity happened of sending them with their captain over to England to be tried. Accordingly, a sessions of admiralty being held at the Old Bailey in May 1701, Captain Kidd, Nicholas Churchill, James Howe, Robert Lumley, William Jenkins, Gabriel Loff, Hugh Parrott, Richard Barleycorn, Abel Owens, and Darby Mullins were arraigned for piracy and robbery on the high seas, and all found guilty except 3. These were Robert Lumley, William Jenkins, and Richard Barleycorn, who, proving themselves to be apprentices to some of the officers of the ship, and producing their indentures in court, were acquitted. Kidd was tried upon an indictment of murder also for killing Moore, the gunner, and found guilty of the same. Nicholas Churchill and James Howe pleaded the king's pardon as having surrendered themselves within the time limited in the proclamation, and Colonel Bass, governor of West Jersey, to whom they surrendered being in court and called upon, proved the same. However, this plea was overruled by the court because, there being 4 commissioners named in the proclamation, it was adjudged no other person was qualified to receive their surrender, and that they could not be entitled to the benefit. As to Captain Kidd's defense, he insisted much upon his own innocence and the villainy of his men. He said he went out in a laudable employment and had no occasion, being then in good circumstances, to go a-pirating, that the men often mutinied against him and did as they pleased, that he was threatened to be shot in his cabin, and that 95 left him at one time and set fire to his boat, so that he was disabled from bringing his ship home, or the prizes he took, to have them regularly condemned, which he said were taken by virtue of a commission under the broad seal, they having French passes. The captain called one Colonel Hewson to his reputation, who gave him an extraordinary character, and declared to the court that he had served under his command and been in 2 engagements with him against the French, in which he fought as well as any man he ever saw, that there were only Kidd's ship and his own against Monsieur Ducasse, who commanded a squadron of 6 sail, and they got the better of him. But this being several years before the facts mentioned in the indictment were committed, proved of no manner of service to the prisoner on his trial. As to the friendship shown to Culliford, a notorious pirate, Kidd denied, and said he intended to have taken him, but his men, being a parcel of rogues and villains, refused to stand by him, and several of them ran away from his ship to the said pirate. But the evidence being full and particular against him, he was found guilty, as before mentioned. When Kidd was asked what he had to say why sentence should not pass against him, he answered that he had nothing to say, but that he had been sworn against by perjured, wicked people. And when the sentence was pronounced, he said, "My lord, it is a very hard sentence. For my part, I am the innocentest person of them all. Only I have been sworn against by perjured persons." Wherefore, about a week after, Captain Kidd, Nicholas Churchill, James Howe, Gabriel Loff, Hugh Parrott, Abel Owen, and Darby Mullins were executed at the execution dock, and afterwards hung up in chains at some distance from each other down the river, where their bodies hung exposed for many years.
Thank you for joining us today. Remember to like the video if you liked it, subscribe, and click the bell to get notifications in your feed. See you next time on Pendant and Ring.